I don't take night shifts in rural clinics anymore. I know that sounds dramatic, but after what happened at Bowen Clinic in Harlan County, Kentucky, I made a promise to myself. Daylight hours only. No exceptions. I'm a traveling nurse. Have been for about 7 years now. The job takes me all over. Small towns, remote communities, places where the nearest hospital might be 2 hours away on winding mountain roads. I fill in gaps, cover for vacations and medical leaves, help out understaffed facilities. It's good work, meaningful work, and for the most part, I've loved it. But there are some places that feel wrong the moment you step inside. You know what I mean? That prickling sensation at the back of your neck, that feeling of being watched even when you're alone. Bowen Clinic was one of those places. The clinic sat at the end of a gravel road about 15 miles from the nearest town. It was a small, single-story building that had been converted from an old company store back when coal was king in these parts. The waiting room still had the original hardwood floors, worn smooth by decades of boots and bare feet. The examination rooms were cramped, the equipment was outdated, and the fluorescent lights buzzed constantly, like insects trapped behind the panels. I arrived on a Tuesday evening in late October. The regular nurse, a woman named Patty who I'd spoken to on the phone, met me at the door. She looked exhausted, deep circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun. She handed me the keys and a folder full of patient files before I could even set down my bag. "I appreciate you coming on such short notice," she said. "My mother's in the hospital over in Lexington. I've got to be there." "Of course," I said. "Take all the time you need." She hesitated at the door, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Listen, most nights are quiet out here. Maybe 1 or 2 patients, if that. But if anyone comes in talking about the woods..." She paused, pressing her lips together. "Just be careful what you believe." Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone. Her taillights disappeared down the gravel road, and I was alone. The first few hours were uneventful. I organized the supply closet, reviewed patient files, and made myself a cup of instant coffee from the break room. The silence out here was different from what I was used to, heavier somehow, like the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Around 11 o'clock, headlights swept across the front windows. I heard a car door slam, then footsteps on the wooden porch. The front door burst open, and a man stumbled inside. He was maybe 50 years old, wearing a flannel jacket and mud-caked boots. His face was pale, slick with sweat, and his eyes were wide with something that looked like terror. But what caught my attention, what made my stomach drop, was his left arm. It was wrapped in a bloody dish towel, and even from across the room, I could see the red seeping through. "Please," he gasped. "Please, you gotta help me." I rushed over and guided him to the nearest examination room. "Sit down. Let me see." I carefully unwrapped the dish towel, and what I saw made me take a step back. His forearm had been torn open from elbow to wrist. Not cut, torn. The edges of the wound were ragged, almost serrated, like something with teeth had clamped down and pulled. I could see the white of bone through the mess of muscle and tissue. "What happened?" I asked, already reaching for supplies. I needed to stop the bleeding, clean the wound, figure out if he needed to be airlifted to a trauma center. The man, his name was Earl, I learned later, just shook his head. His whole body was trembling. "It came out of the trees," he whispered. "I was checking my rabbit traps up near the old Hensley property. I do it every night. Been doing it for 30 years. Never had no trouble before." I pressed gauze against the wound, applying pressure. "What came out of the trees? A bear? A wild dog?" Earl looked at me, And I saw it then, the pure, undiluted fear of a man who had seen something that defied explanation. "It wasn't no animal," he said. "It walked like a man, but it wasn't no man either." A chill ran down my spine, but I kept my focus on the wound. "Earl, I need you to stay calm. You've lost a lot of blood. Can you tell me more about what you saw?" He was quiet for a moment, his breathing ragged. Then he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was tall, taller than any man I ever seen, and thin, so thin you could see its ribs through its skin. It didn't have no clothes on, but its skin was wrong, gray like ash, and its face." He trailed off, his eyes going distant. "Earl, it didn't have no face," he said. "Just smooth skin where face should be, but it had a mouth that opened too wide, all the way back to where the ears should have been, and teeth, so many teeth." I wanted to tell him that he was in shock, that the blood loss was making him see things, but something about the way he spoke, the conviction in his voice, made me hesitate. "It grabbed my arm," Earl continued. "I tried to pull away, but it was so strong, stronger than anything, and it bit me, and it started to pull, like it was trying to tear my arm clean off. I only got away because I think it let me go." "It let you go?" Earl nodded slowly. "It could have killed me. I know it could have. But it stopped. It just stopped. And then it stood there, watching me run. I could feel it watching me all the way back to my truck. I finished cleaning the wound as best I could, but it was clear he needed more than I could provide. The damage was too extensive. I told him I was going to call for an ambulance, and he grabbed my wrist with his good hand. "Don't leave me alone," he said. "Please." It followed me here. I know it did. I looked towards the front windows. The parking lot was empty except for Earl's truck and my car. The woods beyond were nothing but darkness. "There's nothing out there," I said, trying to sound confident. "You're safe here." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. I made the call for the ambulance. They said it would be at least 45 minutes. The nearest station was in the next county, and these roads weren't easy to navigate at night. I told Earl to lie back and try to rest, but he refused to close his eyes. "It's out there," he kept saying. "I can feel it." I decided to check the locks on all the doors. It was a small clinic, just the front entrance, a back door by the supply room, and a side door that led to a small fenced area where we kept the medical waste bins. I made sure all three were secure, then returned to the examination room. Earl was sitting up, staring at the window. The blinds were closed, but there was a small gap at the bottom where they didn't quite reach the sill. "Something moved out there," he said. "It was probably just the wind. We're surrounded by trees." It wasn't the wind. I walked to the window and reached for the cord to lower the blinds further. That's when I saw it. A shape standing at the edge of the parking lot where the gravel met the grass. It was tall, impossibly tall, at least 7 feet, and so thin that it looked like a skeleton wrapped in gray cloth. But it wasn't cloth. It was skin, and it was facing the clinic, facing me. I yanked the blinds down so fast the cord snapped off in my hand. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "You saw it," Earl said. It wasn't a question. I couldn't answer. I couldn't find words. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the closed blinds like the creature might come through them at any moment. "It wants to finish what it started," Earl whispered. "It let me go so it could follow me here, so it could take its time." "Stop," I said, finally finding my voice. "Just stop. We're inside. The doors are locked. The ambulance is on its way." But even as I said it, I heard something. A soft sound, like fingernails dragging across wood. It was coming from the back of the clinic, the supply room, the back door. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a metal IV stand, and moved toward the sound. Earl called after me, begging me not to go, but I couldn't just sit there and wait. I needed to know. The hallway to the supply room was dark. The fluorescent light above had burned out weeks ago, according to the maintenance log, and no one had replaced it. I used the flashlight on my phone to light my way, the beam cutting through the shadows. The scratching sound stopped. I reached the supply room door and put my ear against it. Silence. Complete silence. I couldn't even hear Earl's ragged breathing from the examination room anymore. Slowly, I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was empty. Shelves of bandages and medication, a small refrigerator for vaccines, a mop and bucket in the corner. The back door was still locked. I could see the deadbolt in place. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. And then the lights went out. Not just the flashlight on my phone, everything. The entire clinic plunged into darkness. I heard Earl scream from the examination room, a raw, terrified sound that echoed through the empty hallways. I ran. I couldn't see anything, but I knew the layout. Straight down the hall, left at the junction, through the waiting room. I slammed into a wall at one point, bounced off, kept going. Earl's screaming had stopped, and somehow that was worse. When I reached the examination room, I used my phone's flashlight again, even though my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. Earl was gone. The examination table where he'd been sitting was empty. There was blood on the floor, a lot of it, trailing from the table to the window that was now wide open, the blinds torn down and hanging in shreds. I heard a sound outside, a wet, crunching sound that I will never forget as long as I live. I didn't look. I couldn't look. I ran to the front door, fumbled with the locks, and burst out into the parking lot. I got in my car and drove. I didn't stop until I reached the main road, and even then, I kept going until I hit the interstate. The ambulance found Earl's truck still parked at the clinic, but they never found Earl. The police searched the woods for 3 days. They found blood, a lot of blood, but no body. No evidence of what had attacked him, nothing. They ruled it an animal attack. A bear, probably. Or maybe a pack of wild dogs. That's what they wrote in the report, anyway. But I know what I saw. I know what was standing at the edge of that parking lot, watching me through the window. And I know that it wasn't any animal. I quit traveling to rural clinics after that. I work in a hospital now, in a city with streetlights and security guards and walls that feel solid and safe. But sometimes, late at night when I'm working the graveyard shift, I think about Bowen Clinic. I think about Earl and his rabbit traps and the thing that came out of the woods, and I wonder if it's still out there, waiting.